What did you want to be when you grew up? A famous celebrity? Successful business person? Maybe a loving parent? When we're young, our career options seem limited only by our dreams and our role models and our ideals. Maybe that's why so many young people dream of being a brave firefighter that rushes into a burning building to save a fearful family. Or an astronaut that gets to go boldly where no one has gone before, seeking out strange new worlds and making great new scientific discoveries. Some kids, they aspire to be the leaders of the free world. I'm referring, of course, to the ones on the right, though possibly the ones on the left had that dream at one point as well. Me? I wanted to be a superhero. This is me when I was, I think, 5 years old. And I wanted to have super strength and X-ray vision and to be able to fly. Wouldn't that be so cool? Unfortunately for me, and millions of other kids really, we grow up and reality sets in. And we kind of recognize that we're not likely to be bathed in the light of an alien sun or bitten by a radioactive spider or find some magic piece of jewelry that endows us with special powers. And so we give up on the idea that we can grow up to be a superhero. We accept that. Or do we? You know, you only have to look as far as your local cinema to see what Hollywood puts in front of us in those big budget action blockbusters. And this year, for the first time in quite some time, superheroes surpassed princesses as the #1 costume for Halloween, including among adults. But more than just pop culture and dress up, we never really lose that aspiration, that real desire to change the world for good and to leave a lasting and enduring legacy. It's just that that dream of X-ray vision gets replaced by a desire to develop some new technology that enables us to see farther into the heavens or deeper into our own selves. The quest for good and evil gets recast as a genuine desire to relieve suffering within our communities and bring about peace in our world. Our career choices now turn to wanting to be able to go to work to cure cancer in the morning and still get home in time to coach our kids' soccer game. So how do we become these modern-day superheroes? Well, first let's lose the cape and the tights, because that's not really a good look for me. It's probably not a good look for most people. But let's also lose this idea of the lone wolf superhero or heroine. Because, as you heard earlier, heroism is almost always a team effort. That brave firefighter is supported by a whole squadron of people who are making sure the equipment works, that are looking for flare-ups, that are putting down fire lines. And Neil Armstrong's one small step would have never gotten off the ground were it not for the hundreds and thousands of men and women at Lockheed and NASA, and even in the halls of Congress and the Oval Office that provided funding, that sewed spacesuits, that built the rockets that took those brave astronauts to the moon and back. Heroism almost always, in the real world and not in comics, comes about by being part of a larger thing. Because no matter how powerful, no matter how amazing, we can always achieve more together than we can by ourselves. I read recently about a gentleman by the name of Kevin Turf. Kevin owned an environmental company, and he was flying home to the United States from Paris on September 11th, 2001. After the Twin Towers fell, airspace was closed over the United States, and Kevin's plane, along with dozens of others, was diverted to a small town in Newfoundland in Canada. It was a pretty fearful time. Kevin spent 3 days sleeping on the floor of a local school there. And I remember that it was a time that we were all gripped by fear and anxiety and worry and grief over the people in Washington and Virginia and New York. But those dark thoughts weren't the thing that Kevin took from his experience, because something really remarkable happened. You see, the 10,000 residents of Gander in Newfoundland came out in droves to support the nearly 7,000 strangers that had literally fallen from the sky to be stranded in their small town. They brought out food and blankets to the shelters. They loaned people their cars and their trucks and opened their homes. The local pharmacy filled prescriptions for free. The people of Gander opened their hearts and their homes and their businesses to these random people from all around the world. And Kevin was so touched by this that after he'd gotten back home safely to the United States, the following year on September 11th, 2002, he gave the 40 or so employees of his company the day off and $100 each and told them to go do some good in the world. And when they came back that evening to talk about what they'd done, it was pretty amazing. People had gone and bought groceries for the elderly person down the hall or donated supplies to the school. They had bought coffee or a bus fare for somebody that they never knew. And Kevin and his employees repeated that almost every year since, leading to hundreds of small acts of kindness, of ways to pay it forward. What a tremendous legacy that is for Kevin and his community. But it's more than that, because it's really the legacy of the 10,000 people in Gander in Newfoundland that helped show the way with their small acts of kindness. And they didn't set out to create a movement. They just were there to help a frightened and anxious group of 6,700 people that came from the sky. Dr. Martin Luther King quotes Thomas Penfield as saying that the arc of moral justice is long, but the arc of moral responsibility is long, but it bends towards justice. And in our continuing quest for greater equality, for fairness, for inclusion, we see these moments, these flash events. But real change comes about not by those individual moments, but through the continuous drumbeat of activity, emotion, that eventually turns the tide. In the technology sector where I work, we have a challenge with diversity in the workforce. Now, the reasons for that are fairly complex and interrelated. Conscious and unconscious bias in hiring and promotion, structural and societal issues that really dog us since birth, a disproportionately low number of women and minorities graduating from computer science in top-tier universities. And so it's tempting to think that the solutions must also be as complicated, as intricate, as difficult. But a number of studies have shown that simply by insisting on having a diverse slate of candidates during the interview process, the resulting hiring can be much, much more diverse and inclusive. And in this context, diversity means having two or more candidates that are more broadly reflective of the population at large than, say, the population in technology today. Now, when we think of the people that have broken the glass ceiling for women and minorities, we don't think of a hiring manager sitting in a cubicle somewhere. We think of these folks. Dr. Madame Curie and her tremendous achievements in science, Susan B. Anthony and her tireless work for women's suffrage and against slavery. Jackie Robinson broke the color bar in Major League Baseball. And their legacies and their achievements are something that we should recognize and applaud and memorialize. But what about that hiring manager sitting in that cubicle? What if all the hiring managers in all of the cubicles in technology simply insisted on having that diverse slate of candidates? What could that mean? Maybe a young woman or an aspiring engineer of color, or even an older person that's rejoining the workforce after an absence. Maybe they get an opportunity in technology that they wouldn't have otherwise found. And leaving aside what that does for diversity in technology, those interesting viewpoints, that uniqueness of experience that they bring to their teams might very well make the difference in that great new gadget, in that wonder drug, or in being able to put a man or a woman on Mars. What a tremendous legacy would that be for all of us? So maybe being a hero isn't really about that single heroic act. In fact, maybe heroism isn't really about those individual acts at all. It's reflected in our values. And the values of fairness and respect, of inclusion, humility, those are just as valid here in Monterey as they would be in Gotham or Metropolis. And I'll admit that, maybe I haven't quite given up on the dream of flight, but I do know that all of us have a role to play in helping to bend that moral arc just a little bit closer to justice. Not with super strength, but through the everyday interactions and the simple acts of kindness that we can show to one another. Then all of us can be superheroes. No capes required. Thank you.